is Take a Stand.
Welcome back to Take a Stand here. The talk of the mountains. Now, the phone lines are closed. I know it's a free-for-all Friday. I know people wait all week for this day of chaos, but we're suspending it for very good reason for a little while today, and we'll open up the phone lines again soon. But we want to welcome some special guests to the studio and to Matt Cave HD, our new home here, and that is Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes. Good to see both of you again, and welcome to the new abode.
Matt, it's great to be here with you.
Now, people are probably wondering now, wait a minute, now I've heard both of these folks on the program before, and John, you've been on with us probably more so, and whenever, if I've gone to Raleigh and you were a guest on the program, we're broadcasting from Raleigh, the trip we made, the recent trip to Charlotte, they heard you on with me in Charlotte as well, and maybe they're wondering, well, wait a minute, what would bring John Rhodes to Asheville?
We've done in the North Carolina General Assembly to help expose some of the corruption and try to put integrity back into the political process in North Carolina, which is badly needed right now, Matt.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, Senator, when you walked in, what I said to you is you must be feeling awfully validated these days. And the same could be for both of you. But Senator, some of the things that you were decrying, and when we'd talk 2 years ago or more, and the things that you were warning about and crying out to anyone who would listen about legislative reforms needed in the state, now it's almost like common knowledge that, oh, well, there's some serious things we need to fix. But a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago, you were a lone wolf out there on some of these issues.
Well, not alone. The thing is that since the Capitol Press Corps didn't tell you what was going on, it seemed like nobody was speaking out. I had one person when I was running for governor say, well, I've never heard of you. Obviously, you haven't done anything. John was speaking out. Mm-hmm. John Bluss was speaking out. Hugh Webster was speaking out. But you can shout all you want in Raleigh. If it doesn't get past the belt line, the people here don't know it. And they haven't even started yet. I wrote an article, First Domino Falls. There better be a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had some fun yesterday with the Durham Herald-Sun. They had an article, and they quoted from the Charlotte Observer, but they were talking about Richard Moore and his solicitation of campaign contributions from the companies that he contracts to manage state pension funds. And how he doesn't see anything wrong with that at all. Billions and billions of dollars, and yet, the Durham Herald-Sun quoted the Charlotte Observer story about that from a few days ago and said, in the wake of Jim Black's guilty convictions or anything else, saying now that this has come to light and people are paying attention, and I had to chuckle about that because there have been people in North Carolina, a few of us anyway, that have been yelling about this kind of thing for a long time. But you're right, the mainline media in North Carolina, it's the hip thing to do all of a sudden to cover some of this corruption in the state government.
Well, we have been talking about it for some time since we've been down there, both Senator Shubert, myself, and others, John Bluss, Senator Webster. But Matt, you got to understand, and your listeners should really understand, this is just the tip of the iceberg. North Carolinians should really embrace themselves for what may be coming down and being exposed in the coming months, coming years, coming out of not only the legislature but also other branches of state government.
And as for the idea that the Charlotte Observer has done this big expose, take a look at the March 12th issue of Forbes. It was already out. They knew the story was coming. Maybe they were going to do the same thing. But I've been complaining about Mr. Moore since 2001 when I went to the first meeting of the pension committee and you couldn't get real numbers. Mm-hmm. And Forbes said, in all 6 years he's been state treasurer, he hasn't filed the mandated reports. But the Charlotte Observer said he hasn't broken any laws. Well, there ought to be a law.
Well, if they said so.
Yeah, well.
I mean, who are we? Let's just end the show right now. If they said it's nothing wrong with it, well, then there must be nothing wrong with it. No, but there's an interesting thing too, and you tell me if I'm wrong, both of you. A common bond that I see between both of you is that with all of the articulation that you made of these issues way ahead of the curve, way before anyone else in politics started getting on this bandwagon of so-called ethics reforms and things, which we can discuss how ethical the reforms are, or how little the reforms are. But both of you have failed to see support come from your own party.
Well,
and that's now I have to reveal my bias. I'm an independent. I'm a fierce independent. And so when I look to both of you, who I have seen as heroes in state government and heroes for the population, that you have been taking a stand. You have been unforgivingly blunt about the things going on in state government, and that's why each of you have been on my program so many times, because, hey, you helped me to get the word out to Western North Carolina. But yet, when it came push to shove, there wasn't a whole lot of support from at least the hierarchy within your own party. And I think it's important to differentiate between hierarchy and the grassroots.
Well, and that's one reason when I heard that Don was organizing John Rhodes Day to honor John, I really wanted to do that, because you don't realize, the public doesn't realize how much abuse this man took. I was fortunate. I did get pretty good support within my own community, within the party. But John took a lot of hits that were totally undeserved. And, you hear so much about, well, we need to do something about the money. If the party would inform their members fully all the time, a huge amount of money would not be required to run for office, because you couldn't do these massive last-minute lie campaigns that have been used to take out so many good people.
Right. And with John, I mean, being primaried out, we talked a little bit about this when I was in Charlotte, the last trip to Charlotte, and being primaried out. And for those of us around other parts of the state watching that race, it was almost shocking, saying, oh my goodness, here was the very man who was trying to lead a legislative reform movement before it was the hip thing to do, or before people started getting convicted. You were there introducing the bills that they now want to look like they're following, and yet you were primaried out from your own district, and that was kind of shocking for a lot of us around the state.
Well, the thing that I was really concerned about it, Matt, when you're in an elected office, a lot of people like to get reelected. Sure, that's great, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you stay true to the Constitution, that you stay true to that oath of office first and foremost, regardless of whether you get reelected or not. But the thing that made me really concerned about it is that it sent a message to other legislators over in the House and the Senate that if you speak out against this, we're going to come after you. Fortunately, through efforts here in Western North Carolina and other efforts across the state, we're seeing that they are doing some rewarding of that. And in regards to John Rhodes Day, let's make sure that we celebrate what that means, and not the individual, but the principles on which that day stands.
Yeah, and that's going to be kind of weird, though, isn't it? I mean, saying, wow, there's enough people that have decided to do a day like this, to call it John Rhodes Day, as John Rhodes. That's got to be kind of strange in itself, isn't it? I mean, because I've gotten to know you a bit over the last few years, and we've talked so many times, and I know what a humble person you are. So I know that's got to be kind of a strange experience for you.
It is. It's different. Again, it's not about being reelected. It's not about John Rhodes. It is about the principles and the ideals, not about the man or the individual, but about the principles and the idea of the pursuit of good government. And that's what we all should really strive for, is the pursuit of good government, and that's very important.
And one of the things I also want to do today is I want to take the opportunity with the listeners for them to get an idea. Now, Senator Shubert, you had mentioned the abuse that John took, and I have a few examples of some of the abuse in audio files that, fortunately, there are still some people who record some of these committee meetings and floor speeches and things, and so I have some of that audio, and people who listen to the show on a regular basis and have been with me for some time have heard some of this before. But a little bit of an example of some of the abuse that went on. It's not so much it's not about, well, look at poor John, he took a whipping. No, he's a strong guy. He's a strong guy. He can take it. I know. I've seen him in action. He can take it. This is more, for me, an opportunity to once again remind people of how far the status quo will go to protect the status quo in Raleigh. Now, I'm going to start with the lightest example that I have, but really just to give my listeners a validation of how ahead of the curve John was in talking about budget and taxes and taxpayer bill of rights and things. Agnes, if you could pull up budget cut one, I want to play this. This was on floor speeches where they were about to vote on the budget, where there's an increase in spending, surplus money is all being spent, one-time items are being created that are not going to be funded beyond the 1 year. And when Representative Rhodes is recognized on the floor, right at the very beginning, you hear all kinds of laughter in the background, being laughed at when he's stepping up. When you listen to this and Representative John Rhodes is recognized on the floor of the House, first notice all the laughter as he's rising to speak. He was laughed at by the chamber, and that ought to send a shockwave to people that someone who says what you're going to hear him say about constitutionality, about responsible governance, about giving money back to the taxpayers when they've been overtaxed, and all these different things. When you listen to what Representative John Rhodes has to say, remember how he was laughed at when he was recognized on the floor of the House. Agnes, go ahead and play the clip.
For what purpose does John from Mecklenburg, Representative Rhodes, rise?
Debate the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman may speak on the bill.
Thank you all. We heard about the budget bill today. We've heard a lot of things about it, but I would argue with Representative Hackney that this is not a responsible budget. And it's not a responsible budget by virtue of the fact that it increases spending this year. But I will tell you what this budget is. This is an election year budget. And this budget, you'll be able to go out and tout that you cut taxes, possibly. That's arguable in this document. That you did this for schools and education and all these other programs. But it's an election year budget. But it does increase spending. And it is an irresponsible budget by virtue of the fact that it increases spending and it funds programs with non-reoccurring funds that are going to have to be funded later. And you know what that means, folks? That means a tax increase. Well, you know, the good Lord has blessed the state of North Carolina this time around. We've got a budget surplus. We got lots of millions of dollars. And you know what we need to do with those millions of dollars, folks? We need to give it back to the people who gave it to us in the first place. And that's the people of our state who pay the taxes and pay the taxes and pay the taxes. And they pay lots and lots of taxes up here to Raleigh. We need to give it back to them. Another thing we need to do for the people of North Carolina is we need to pass a taxpayer bill of rights so that when we're having good times, we can fill up our coffers and we can fill up our rainy day funds and we can fill up our natural disaster funds and all those other good funds, highway trust funds, good suggestion funds, what have you. And then in the bad years, we don't have to raise taxes so that our budget line doesn't look like this, like a roller coaster, and we get a gut rush every time we go down the big hill and then a big thrill every time we go back up. But that we grow government at a very nominal rate, and we do increase spending at a nominal rate, but not the highs and not the lows and the highs and the lows. Taxpayer Bill of Rights is desperately needed for North Carolina. We need to do the right thing and the responsible thing, Representative Hackney, and we need to give that surplus back to the people of North Carolina. We need to give it back to them because the people that sent it here, and they ask us to be responsible with this money. Pass the Taxpayer Bill of Rights in the future for North Carolina. The people will love you for it. I'm going to vote against this budget because I don't believe it's a responsible budget. I think it's kind of like a shell game for the people of North Carolina. You're going to say you're cutting taxes this year. You're going to get reelected, and then you're going to come back here, and then you're going to raise taxes in the following year to cover all the expenditures for this year. And that's just the reality of it. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak on the issue, Mr. Speaker. Please vote against the budget. Please vote against Senate Bill 1741. Thank you.
And as I was listening to that, I went down my checklist checking off all of those things that actually have occurred and things that actually are happening now. And, and I go back to the beginning when you were recognized on the floor of the House and the laughters, and actually hearing in my earpieces now, is better than listening on a computer PC as I was going back through these different sound bites. But there was also some groaning and what sounded like some booing in the background as well. And so, here we are, going through our news cycles, the conversations we have every day on this program, and so much of what was said there has already been validated to be true, and so much of it now you're starting to see government reports about, oh, well, this isn't really working out the way we thought it would. We're going to have to do fill in the blank, and it's all things that you just heard Representative John Rhodes say in that clip from last year what was going to happen. So Representative John Rhodes is in the studio with us, also Senator Fern Shubert. We're going to open up the phone lines in just a bit here on the other side of the news, and we'll continue our conversation. I've got some really good sound bites coming up for you all. And John, this is your life. We'll be back with more of Take a Stand right after this. Of the Mountains, the phone lines are opened up now. We have Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes both in the studio with us, making the trip up here to the mountains of western North Carolina. And we couldn't have a more beautiful day for the beginning of March for your trip up here. You know, we cleared it out just for you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we put Don Yelton on top of Craggy Pinnacle, and we just had him shout to the east, and it blew everything right out of here. He started doing that, hee, and the clouds just separate. It's amazing. Never mind Moses. We got Don Yelton in his laugh. All right, so welcome to the studio, though, and we're glad to have you here. As I played that sound clip from the floor of the House, John, I saw you over there just listening to it and writing some notes down and everything. I don't know if you ever get the chance to listen back to the things that happen or the things that you say. We've played a lot of sound bites here, but for your perspective, replaying back through that moment and the process that led up to it and what happened afterwards, what does it make you think about?
Well, it makes me understand, once again, the huge chasm of disconnect between the people's state legislature and what the people of North Carolina want and what their legislature is saying. We don't care what you want. We're going to do what we're going to do. This is going to be the outcome, regardless of whether the people like it or not. Tax increase after tax increase after tax increase, increased spending. We need a taxpayer bill of rights for North Carolina. We need it this session. Immediately. But a lot of those things that we were saying then, I think that you will find are validated. They're talking about budget shortfalls. Why? Because they spent so much of the non-reoccurring funds last year to spawn government programs that will need to be paid for with future tax increases, and that's unfortunate.
And in the governor's proposed budget, he's going into the Highway Trust Fund again. They're just when they say they're going to stop doing it, boom, they increase the amount they're going to raid from the trust fund.
And when they say trust fund, ask yourself, why would anyone with a brain trust these people? Look at their record.
Yeah, good point. All right, let's go to the phone lines now. Mary Ann, welcome to Take a Stand.
How are you, Matt?
Hello.
It's good to hear Representative Rhodes again. I was going to ask a question of how we can now help. I know I used to be getting emails from Representative Rhodes and kind of keeping up with what was going on. I'd like to know how we can help now.
Well, Mary Ann, I think that it's important that you continue to put the pressure on the state legislature, on the representatives and the senators, and you continue to communicate with them and let them know your feelings and your thoughts as a citizen and a taxpayer. Even saying that to you, Mary Ann, I feel like I'm almost giving you lip speak because a lot of them just aren't listening. A lot of them are deleting your emails. A lot of them are just not listening. Again, I say to your listeners, Matt, there is a huge disconnect. I'll put it this way. There are only 4 people that control the whole General Assembly, and there are 2 in the House and 2 in the Senate, and if the other 166 members of the General Assembly stayed home for the session, the outcome would be about the same. So, Mary Ann, I would say just continue to keep calling your representative, and you can email them, but here's something that's pretty effective. If you call them and their legislative assistant answers the phone and says, I'm sorry, but representative or senator is not in, you say, I'll wait. And they say, well, you want me to take a message? No, you say, I'll wait. And just hold the line open. And just continue to wait. And if we get North Carolinians from across the state doing that to actually melt the switchboard down up in Raleigh, maybe then they'll say, maybe there's a problem out there that the public is concerned about. But right now they're not listening to you. I'm sorry.
And
they're just not.
Let me make another suggestion. Call your local newspapers. Call your local media outlets. Ask them how they managed to miss what was going on in Raleigh for the 6 years that Jim Black was Speaker, and ask them what else they're going to miss until the feds come in and clean it up. And ask them if they can't report the news, why you need to be paying them to report the news.
Now, those sound great. Is there a way that we can keep up with or get in touch with Representative Rhodes and yourself?
Well, I understand that someone's set up a website over in the Charlotte area. It's called johnrhodesday.com. And also to contact members of the General Assembly, you can contact the General Assembly switchboard at 919-733-4111. And in regards to email, you can just send one to john@johnrhodes.com if you need to get in touch with me.
That's an easy one to remember. John
Okay.
at johnrhodes.com.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you,
thanks,
Mary Ann.
Bye-bye.
And as far as the legislators not listening and things, as we've been involved as a region in different things, there's been several issues where, it crosses political lines. It's really about people here in the mountains looking and saying, it just makes sense to have a position, fill in the blank, whatever it's been. There's been several issues over the last few years where we as a region have really come together. And when you saw the Western delegation get to the point where they were more afraid of the people here than they were of Jim Black, the state was turned upside down. I talk about the flood relief tax. Remember when that was good? That was a done deal in a matter of 24 hours. I know because I was in Raleigh. We were doing the show from Raleigh. And at 3 o'clock, we had representatives of the Western delegation talking about this flood relief tax and how this is going to happen in the budget. It was a done deal. By 7 o'clock the next morning, not only was that done, but the entire budget process had been flipped upside down because, as you both know, that storm relief tax had nothing to do with storm relief. It had to do with covering for the overspending and the slush funds that had been tucked away by the leadership in the House and the Senate.
A lot of these taxes, Matt, don't have anything to do, if they say it's for the children, if it's for education, it's not. It's about holding on to personal power. It's about putting more campaign contributions in the coffers. It is not about service to the public.
And I hope that people realize, too, that, by those stands that they took and by making those phone calls and melting down the switchboard in Raleigh like they did, that because a revenue stream that was expected to be there at the final moment, all of a sudden the Western delegation said, there's no way we can vote for this. We can't go home if we vote for this. Well, how was the rest of the state going to vote for a flood relief tax to benefit the West if the Western delegation, Democrats and Republicans, were going to vote against it? And because that had happened at the last minute, all of a sudden there was a budget crisis. How do we make things balance? Where are we? And that started a lot of the Pandora's box opening up. And it was the people of Western North Carolina in the last moments turning that tax upside down that helped to really accelerate the exposure of these slush funds and things that I know you were talking about, John. But that was something where the balance sheet didn't work out. They had a cover story, it went away, and now they were exposed. They were out in the front lawn with nothing but their boxers on. So.
That's right. Well, it's always it really does come down to a priority of spending. North Carolina does not have an income problem. They have taken enough money out of the taxpayers' pockets, extracted enough cash out of their pockets. It's not an income problem. It's a priority of spending crisis.
And the priority seems to be that a few people can prioritize their personal self-interest ahead of the whole state.
And you know what? She says it exactly right. And for anyone who would say, "Oh, Senator Shubert, you're not telling us right. You've got some personal agenda," look at the historical evidence that has now come forth. One of the most powerful politicians in the state is taking wads of cash and putting it in his pocket in a men's bathroom.
But I have to ask, why does it smell worse to take cash in a bathroom than to sell seats on the DOT board in a boardroom or in the governor's mansion or wherever you may be cutting a deal?
That is a good point.
Yeah, very, very well said. And let's go to the phone lines again. Nancy, welcome to Take a Stand.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Ms. Shubert and Mr. Rhodes, I would just like to say from the bottom of our hearts here in Western North Carolina, thank you. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for taking the pot shots, getting laughed at. Thank you. Thank you for all you did.
Well,
I wish we could have some people in our own area that would actually stand up. I think my husband's trying to do that. So, Matt Mittan does that on his show all the time. I just wish that what you have would just spread, because that's what we need. We just really need people like you, people of honor and character that just say the truth, and they don't, I don't know, that pander to everyone else, and that's just, I don't know how to help make that happen here, but I so wish it could, and I'm going to be there tomorrow night to honor you. And I just want to let you know, thank you so much.
Well, Nancy, thank you. And we are honored by your comments, and we certainly appreciate them. And, Senator Shubert and I had the conversation driving up from Charlotte today, and we thought, what is all this about? And it just comes down to electing people who know the difference between right and wrong. And even more so than that, the central issue is integrity.
And for me, what I've always respected about both of you and why I've turned to you as guests on the program and to, cover the sound bites of floor speeches and things like that is it's regardless of what letter is next to someone's name on a registration box. It's regardless of what, how many precincts are majority, what this party or that party. You just speak from your heart and from your brain, and you keep it measured against the Constitution, and that is what we need.
Matt, this issue is not a Republican or Democrat issue, what you've seen swirling around Jim Black. You'll remember that it was Republicans that helped keep him in power, so they share some of the blame of it, too. It is not a Republican or Democrat issue. It is an issue of just doing the right thing.
And if the public wants to help, they really need, regardless of the party, to hold their leaders to a standard of integrity. This business of, well, he's a crook, but he's our crook. Well, folks, get real. If he'll lie to someone else, he'll lie to you.
And for folks that are just tuning in, or if you think you have somewhere you have to get to, I want to tell you, you do not want to miss some of the sound bites we're going to be playing for you on the other side of the news, because I'll tell you, if you're still undecided about what the state of our state government is, it's going to be crystal clear to you when I start playing some of these sound bites of what goes on in Raleigh when you don't play to the power base in the leadership in Raleigh. You're going to hear how much the power structure in Raleigh thinks about the people of North Carolina when you hear these sound bites. Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes are guests in the studio today. Also, we're going to be telling you after this commercial break, we'll be letting you know how you can meet these folks face-to-face and where they're going to be speaking here in Western North Carolina after this as well, and we'll take more of your phone calls. Stay tuned for more of Take a Stand right here of the Mountains, and we are thrilled to have our special guests here in the program with us today, Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes. They've made the trek up here to the mountains of Western North Carolina, and they're coming to speak to you folks here in the Western region. You share a kindred spirit with these folks that we're talking here today, and I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but I think they're here also because they realize that there's been an awakening in Western North Carolina, that there is an active populace out here that is helping to change the direction of the state of North Carolina, and you folks got to keep that up. I mean, keep doing things with the information you get. I can't tell you what to do with the information we pass along, but the fact is many of you are doing things with that information, and it's changing the very course of history in this state. Whether John Rhodes gets reelected or Fern Shubert gets elected or not, if they lose their reelection bids, as John said earlier in the conversation, that's not what matters. What matters is doing what's right and wrong and trusting that a free people will win out the day. Because America, there's no other alternative. I mean, the alternative is unacceptable. Free, constitutionally minded people will win out the day, and you have to stay the course on what's right and avoid what's wrong. And so that's what we're talking about here today. And let's go to the phone lines, shall we? Or did you want to add anything?
Well, I would just say I hope that the wildfire spreads east from the mountains of North Carolina and spreads across our state and burns down a lot of the concealment of these politicians who are involved in corruption.
And we've seen some of that. There's been some school board meetings in some of the areas around the state that have been actually pretty exciting to see. People going in, refusing to be shut down, refusing to be gavelled down, scaring these elected officials to the point where they're calling in law enforcement and everything. Why? Because citizens dared to show up and speak.
You must be assertive with your elected officials.
Absolutely.
It's a time.
All right, let's go to the phone line. Oh, I promised I would tell you about where you can meet these folks. Tomorrow night at Ferguson Auditorium at AB Tech, you're going to have a chance to meet these folks. At 5:30 is when the meet and greet will begin, and at 6 o'clock they'll begin a program at Ferguson Auditorium, AB Tech tomorrow night. There's no charge, there's no admission or anything else, and you'll get a chance to meet these folks. And John will be the initial inductee into the John Rhodes Society of Honest Politicians. A coalition of people have put that organization together to reflect the values that were demonstrated by the activities on a day in and day out basis by John, and so he has the honor of having a society for honest politicians that is supported by citizens named after him. He will be the initial inductee, and then Senator Fern Shubert will be inducted also, and then our own R.L. Clark from Western North Carolina will be inducted as well, a man that was known as Senator No to the lobbyists and the insiders in Raleigh. That's a pretty honorable distinction in my book right there. All right, let's try to get a couple of phone calls in here. James, welcome to Take a Stand.
Hey, I just want to say how proud I am of what you're doing, Matt, and these representatives. And if y'all stick with us, we'll stick with you.
All right, appreciate it.
Thank you, James.
All right, thanks a lot. Jane, you're on Take a Stand. Welcome.
Yes, hi. I just want to say many thanks to Senator Shubert and to Representative Rhodes. I was a big supporter of Senator Schubert's when she ran for governor. I was very disappointed that her message somehow got lost. But it's a message that resonates now throughout the state. And one of her disciples, William Geen, of course, formed ALIPAC. And I hope that Senator Shubert will again be pressing to stop state services for illegal aliens and to help the taxpayers in North Carolina to rid themselves of this horrible burden. And again, just to thank the senator for being so far away ahead of everyone on this issue and yet so misunderstood. And now I think people are finally catching on that this is a burden that we just cannot afford. And I just wanted to say that, Matt.
Thank you.
And I thank you very much for your support when I ran. I'm still speaking out on the issues. I'm still having the same basic problem. The Raleigh News and Observer, the Charlotte Observer, the major papers do not want to hear what I'm saying. But to those that are listening, Jim Black is not the problem in Raleigh. In fact, I wrote a friend not too long ago, if I had a choice between keeping him and getting rid of the editorial blackout that has kept the public out of Raleigh, I'd probably keep Jim Black because he's done less damage. There are so many bigger problems still there that the Capitol Press Corps will not talk about that it's not even funny. And they're patting themselves on their back because they exposed him after the feds caught him.
Well, see, here's the solace I take in that, though. They didn't actually expose him. He had been exposed to the point where they could no longer have any credibility if they ignored it.
Precisely.
And so in the same avenues of information that exposed Jim Black are exposing the other people in state government. And the mainline media, they can still try to choose the old sit it out and pretend it's not their game, but they will have to come around. We'll be back with Fern Shubert and John Rhodes more on the other side of the news. We have special guests in the studio with us today, and that is Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes, making the long trek up here to the mountains from what we would consider the central part of the state, even though the Queen City considers itself part of the western half of the state. You're central to us. But we're glad to have you here in the mountains today on a beautiful, beautiful Blue Ridge day and enjoying the conversation, too. And I hope that people are finding it inspiring and validating.
Well, thank you, Matt. It's good to be here and good to be in western North Carolina today.
It's like vacation, and it's nice being surrounded by people that feel, as we do, that it's sort of important for government to work for the public instead of for themselves.
There you go with that radical. What was it? No, what were you called by the Charlotte Observer, John?
Ineffective is another term that they use.
Ineffective, yeah. So basically, validating that corruption still exists.
Correct. It's interesting about that effectiveness ratings. Jim Black was rated number 1 in effectiveness. I was ranked number 120 in effectiveness. I don't know what that tells you, but he's going to prison possibly, and that's
and that's one of the few bones of contention between John and me, because I tried so hard to make 120th, and he made it. But people do
Try
not.
harder, Senator.
He beat you out
Try
from the
harder.
bottom of the list.
Well, people don't realize when the Republicans got together in, I think it was 2002, after seeing the effectiveness rating for a while, the Republican House caucus actually boycotted the rating because it was so totally bogus. All it rates is how well you get along with the Democratic powers to be in Raleigh is really what it comes down to. So for the general public, occasionally you'll find somebody that maybe it's correct, but by and large what it's telling you is how close are they to the corruption.
Yeah, and one of the things, too, that I believe, at least in my circle, it seems like the awakening is underway, and it's been underway for over a year now, that people are realizing that Raleigh will circle the wagons around others that are interested in Raleigh. And by interested in Raleigh, I mean interested in themselves, in state government, self-preservation of their power and their titles and their access to committee meetings and getting to put their names on bills that they know will pass because they've paid the proper tribute to the king. And I believe people are starting to see that. I think the Google situation is a prime example of once again validating that a lot of folks in Raleigh will play to what the leadership wants them to do rather than to the people they're there to represent, and sign confidentiality agreements to not reveal the obligating of $260 million of taxpayers' money, and legislators signing confidentiality agreements with corporations to not discuss that publicly?
Well, some of us have talked about incentives for years because you can slice it any way you want to, but what it's saying is we are going to discriminate against longtime North Carolina residents in favor of people that just showed up.
And not even check to make sure they're going to do what they say they're going to. Now we find out that $260 million is going to get a computer warehouse. That's basically what's going to be built. So, it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning.
Well, Matt, I really believe that a new morning is coming for North Carolina. But we are still in the darkness, and the night is very cold, but it's coming. I believe that it's coming, and you see one of the three most powerful politicians in the state, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. He's probably going to spend at least 27 months in prison. He's going down, and he's going to take a lot of buddies with him. But he is a small fish in this whole game, and there's a lot bigger sharks in that pond.
Right. If he would take all the rest of them down, I'd even give him a pass because they would give him all the punishment he could stand.
Yeah, well, he still has that $1 million plus sitting in an account that he has access to.
But here's what's exciting, Matt, and I believe that the dark shroud that has covered the state legislature for so many years is now finally lifting, and the public is able to actually take a peek inside and see what's really going on in there.
Yeah, and you were giving the analogy of the night is long and it's dark. Living in the mountains, the elevation gets you access to the sunbeams a little bit earlier than those that are down flat at sea level. And so I would say to you that here in the mountains we see the dawn. We look to the horizon, we see that glow of early morning light. So in Charlotte it may still seem dark and cold, but here at 3,000 feet we see that warm glow of what's going to be a beautiful sunny day.
Oh, that's awesome, and it's great to be up on the mountaintop today in your beautiful community.
All right, let's go to the phone lines now. Fisher, welcome to Take a Stand. Thanks for holding on.
Yes, I just wanted to call in and say hi to Ms. Shubert. I'm a Union County native, and actually my mother is one of your hometown neighbors, Alice Birmingham.
Oh, yes.
And so I just wanted to call in and say hi and thanks for all you do, and I may be in Union County tomorrow, as a matter of fact.
Well, I'd say, come to church on Sunday, but I'm not going to be back by then, so.
That's right. We are members of the same church as well.
Small world.
And anyway, I would like to see you folks press even harder for equal ballot access in our state, which is, I feel, the main thing that's going to relieve some of these problems in the long run, or hopefully in the short term.
Well, I agree with you on ballot access. I don't think we need a monopoly on who can participate in the political arena. But I really, for me, what it all goes back to, the people have the power. Once the public really finds out what's happening, I think you'll see the change. And that's why, being able to be on a show with Matt like this, I think is so important. Being able to be on cable, like we just cut a cable show that's going to be on next week and the following week. The more people know, the sooner it's going to change. And it's hard for them to accept how bad it is. I just said something I almost feel bad about. I would give Black a pass if he brings down the rest. But you have to realize how much corruption there is there. And my biggest fear is that they'll pick off a few and then it'll be business as usual.
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping that we could make it even retroactive back to the days of, say, people like Senator Aaron Plyler.
I don't know how many people up here know Senator Plyler. He thought he was senator for life from Union County. And when I replaced him, we discovered that Union County was dead last in highway funding, but you'd never have known that from reading the Charlotte Observer.
That is correct.
All right, thanks for the call. I appreciate it, Fisher. Kathy, you're on Take a Stand. Welcome.
Hi. Going back to what Senator Shubert had said before about the ranking polls being nothing but how much you had been in bed with the Democrats or how much you got along with the Democrats, it validates what I've said on this program before, that it's nothing but an opinion poll. If you don't go along with the powers that be, you drop in the ranking. So that's all that was, and I've said it before. And I'd just like to thank her for validating that for me for what I've said on here. But also, I want to thank you all for doing what you're doing down there from the bottom of our hearts. We had some candidates up here in the mountains, R.L. Clark, Mike Harrison, Eric Gorney, Don Yelton, that were working hard to try to be elected to get down there and try to help y'all, help it change in the right direction to where we'll have more honest government. And I don't know what it is, but every one of them, every one of the ones that were running against these guys was reelected up here, even though they wouldn't come out and say they disapproved of what Black was doing. They wouldn't disavow what he had done until later. And they said, "Oh well, maybe I need to look at that." Or they'd say, "Well, he's not been charged with anything yet." And the circling of the wagons, regardless of party, is not acceptable. It is not acceptable. But I wanted to ask a question. What can people do? You talked about the media not telling people what was going on. That's the prime example. We have that up here. They will not tell you what's going on. And I call it bias by omission. And if they don't know what's going on, how can people find out for themselves? What can we do about the media situation? And thank you again.
Well, you're listening to one of the people that's trying to do something about the media, so I guess we do need to do a few carve-outs for what talk radio is doing, what cable TV is doing. But when you hear something on this show and you haven't read it in the paper, call the paper and ask why you're paying them if you don't need them, if they're not going to talk about it. Call your paper right now and say, how come we didn't hear about Jim Black 6 years ago? You've got road problems up here. How come they haven't printed on the front page a map showing the distribution of highway funds around the state? Just get on them to the point that it's going to cost them money if they don't start telling you.
Well, and I've tried to encourage my counterparts in Western North Carolina media outlets of all different formats to say, when you look at the growth and success of this show, I believe there's a direct correlation between the growth and success of this show and the fact that we're hitting real issues that are impacting people's lives, and we're covering what people aren't hearing anywhere, on these state legislative matters. And as people understand more that in North Carolina, the way governments are structured, you think your city council is making decisions. You think your county commission is making decisions. They don't jump without the General Assembly saying, get ready, go. And so as people understand more of how much control and impact the state legislature has on their daily lives and their local governments, they look around and they say, why are we only hearing about that level of government in one place or two places? And I think that's why there's the growth. People have a hunger for it. They know truth when they hear it, and they know when something's wrong. They feel it in their gut. God's programmed all of us with a discernment that if we'll just get our own selves out of the way, we'll know what's right and wrong. And when you take action on that, then everything falls in place. The validation you feel inside is not because you hear a talk radio host say, oh, that's good, or because John Rhodes says you did the right thing. It's because you're doing what you're supposed to do the way God programmed you to do it. And you're going to feel a validation that's spiritual. And I believe that. And so, that I think all these things come together. And if you're in one of the other media outlets and you look and you say, what is this beast that Take a Stand has become? Understand that there's things going on here that you have to get yourself out of your own way to understand.
Well, one thing too, Matt, for your listeners to understand is I believe that the greatest responsibility that a lawmaker has to the citizens of North Carolina is to protect first and foremost their liberties and freedoms. It's not about pork, it's not about perks or anything such as that, but you will have local elected officials come to the General Assembly and want the statutes to be changed so that they can affect citizens. And many times I've just simply said, no, I'm not going to do that because it does directly impact the freedoms and liberties of my citizens, some on issues of annexation, some on issues of further taxation, and that is totally egregious. The ultimate local control is putting as much power as possible in the individual citizens' hands.
All right, and we're talking with Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes, making the trip up from the central part of the state to be with us today in western North Carolina, and also a special event tomorrow night at Ferguson Auditorium, AB Tech. You're going to have a chance to meet these folks and come out there and see them. There's no charge. It's free to the public, as long as seats last anyway. And they're going to be there for meet and greet at 5:30 p.m., and then a program will begin at 6 p.m. We'll continue with more of your phone calls and what John just said about, putting the power in the hands of the people. We're going to start to play some sound clips for you of what happens when the people try to assert a little bit of their citizen power in Raleigh. And you don't want to miss this. We'll be back with more of Take a Stand right of the mountains. Our guests in the studio, Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes, making the trip up here from the Charlotte region to talk to Western Carolinians today, and we are glad to have them with us. I've been talking about these sound clips. We've already played, a floor speech by Representative John Rhodes about the budget, many things that have already come to fruition, others that are now starting to, be validated by, not that I need or you need validation from mainline media, but they're starting to acknowledge that which many of us in the alternative media have been warning you about for some time, and so has Fern Shubert and John Rhodes as well. But the first sound clip I'm going to play for you is an opportunity to see what happens when citizens in North Carolina dare assert themselves to state government, and what happens when you have a representative from your district who dares to try to expose corruption in state government. When that representative tries to expose the corruption, and then you have a local matter that needs legislative attention, guess what happens? The citizens of that area are punished for having a representative that dares speak out against the leadership. And we're going to play you a clip here that had to do with that very same thing. Representative John Rhodes had sponsored a bill to address the controversy of deconsolidation of the school districts in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, an issue that we followed closely here because we have a non-unified school district here. And so we followed that story closely in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Well, Representative John Rhodes, being a representative from that district, introduced a bill to allow the people of Charlotte-Mecklenburg to have a say in their own path, that the people of that area would actually have a say, much like the non-binding zoning referendum that we had for Buncombe County, seeing fit that there would be an opportunity for local people to have a local voice on the matter. Well, let me tell you what happened. At the last minute, before anyone could ever show up in Raleigh from Charlotte on a Thursday afternoon, the leadership, Jim Black and his allies, decided they would meet the technical requirement of the law and say they had a hearing on the bill without an opportunity from anyone who was on the committee that wasn't personally assigned by Jim Black or any people from Mecklenburg County to actually get up to Raleigh to be able to have a voice. Well, when they tried to pull that little stunt, the people of Mecklenburg County, they got a little bit upset about it. So, facing the backlash and the public wrath of the people of Mecklenburg County, the legislative leadership, Jim Black and his allies, decided that they would be great stewards of the public trust by announcing a hearing a couple of days' notice so that people from Mecklenburg County could get up to Raleigh and offer their comments. Here is the first sound clip of what happened when they tried to speak.
At this time, we're going to open the public hearing, and we're going to allow those who are proponents of House Bill 1017 to speak, if they would come to the mic and identify themselves, and you have 20 minutes of allotted time. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? If you identify yourself.
There was a list that just came around and everyone filled it out. Are you looking to go by order?
We will not have a list. You have a 20-minute allotment of time. The stipulation is that you cannot be an elected official.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Representatives of this committee, I thank you for the...
Are you an elected official, sir?
I'm a citizen of Mecklenburg County.
Are you an elected official?
I happen to be, yes.
We will not hear you, sir.
Mr. Lucas,
we will listen to citizens who are not elected.
You can't turn I paid for this, just like everyone else. I would appreciate...
Sir, I'll ask you respectfully to have a seat.
I'm a citizen, and I would like to speak to this committee.
surely must have citizens who are not elected who would like to speak, sir.
Well, they'd like
and
to
your
speak
time
too,
is
but I
going
hope
on.
that you'll allow me that opportunity and the courtesy as a citizen.
The courtesy will be extended to anyone who's not an elected official, sir.
Mr. Lucas,
Thank you very kindly.
I don't want, I would ask that some member of this
For the
committee...
final time, sir, I'll have to ask you to have a seat. Thank you.
Mr. Lucas, Mr. Bell, and Representative, I have a short
Please,
statement that I would like to make, and I hope you'll afford me that opportunity today.
Sir, you are
My
not
name
allowed
is Larry
to make
Govero,
the speech.
and I'm a board member with Charlotte-Mecklenburg.
You are
Schools.
not the board, sir.
I serve on
You
our
cannot
Budget and
speak
Capital
for the
Committee
board. We will not
and the
hear
Legislative Committee as well.
you. Mr. Devereaux, we ask you one final time.
I believe today
not
that I
to
can
speak
for a majority of the
Sir,
public
we
today.
will hear from your...
Even though most of the Mecklenburg County
Is
delegates
anyone else who desires
and
to
local
speak
leaders
as a local citizen
may be in
of
opposition.
Mecklenburg County?
There are a few
If
people
so,
who
we
could
will
really
hear
argue
you.
today
We have a young lady right here who desires to
that
speak.
any
We
large
recognize you.
American school system,
Sir, you're out of order.
especially those that call themselves urban,
Sergeant at Arms,
are working
please.
very
Thank
well.
you. Be removed.
National experts such as James Guthrie from
Would you identify
Vanderbilt
yourself,
University,
sir?
William Ochi from
I'm-
UCLA's Anderson.
My name is Jim Puckett.
Thank you, Mr.
I am a
Puckett.
citizen of Mecklenburg County.
Thank
I
you.
also am a county commissioner who has
Here,
not
Agnes,
spoken
pause
to
that
this.
for a second,
I don't know
please,
who
if you could
spoke to it
pause.
last Thursday.
Go ahead and pause that. I wanted to point out something that happened there. In case people didn't hear it, the chairman, Representative Lucas, ordered the sergeant at arms to forcibly remove an elected official from the chamber of a public hearing. All right, now let's continue. Let's continue with the sound clip here.
You are county commissioner, sir?
Yes, I am. I represent
We will not
120,000
hear
citizens.
the elected officials, sir.
I am an elected official.
Final
that
time. Would you
they
turn
asked
that
me
mic
to
off,
speak.
please? Surely there must be citizens here who are not elected
I
officials.
will speak
who
to this
desire
issue
to
as a
speak.
citizen of Mecklenburg County unless they want to drag me out of here. I will remind there are two issues here, size and responsibility, and we will speak to constituents also.
Sir, if there are no additional speakers who wish to speak for this, yes, ma'am. If you identify,
Is there a precedent no elected officials to speak before a citizens group?
I don't choose to.
Yes.
Sir, if
I
I
have a
cannot
question-
get you
I have
to
a
sit
question-
down, I
a
will
question
adjourn the
for the
meeting.
A question.
And
Yeah,
the
a
previous
question,
motion will
sir,
stand.
A question for the chair.
Move for an adjournment, Mr. Chair.
I'm not speaking. A question for the chair, sir. A question for the chair. Sir, you need to sit down.
I'm a private
Now, the question
citizen
before the committee
and would like
is
to get
a
my
motion
for these gentlemen.
to adjourn.
Excuse me, we're private citizens and we'd like to speak. We don't have a microphone. May we do so?
The motion to adjourn is not debatable. I am reflecting on that motion. I have not decided on that motion just yet. Are there private citizens who desire to be heard?
I desire to speak.
All right.
I sent a letter yesterday and I desire to speak.
Could you identify yourself, please,
My name is
and talk into the mic?
Christine Pinard. I sent you all an email last night. I know it was last notice, but I didn't know the bill was going to be put back to session. This is a huge issue in Mecklenburg County. And I don't want to put it in your lap. I think that it's very important for us to debate this in Mecklenburg County. If you give us that ability with this bill, we will be able to have public conversations. Right now, the public conversations are going on. If a parent speaks up, they pull out the race card on us and they say, you don't care about the urban students. And I personally
I hate to interrupt you, but I do need to ask if you are an elected official in Mexico.
elected
Thank
official.
you very kindly. Go ahead.
Yeah, so what you heard right there was that there's a supposed public hearing that had to be called because the little dog and pony show that they tried to get by on the people of Mecklenburg County did not meet the measure of the law. And so they tried to meet the technical measure of the law, and when people showed up, whether it was a member of the school board, whether it was a county commissioner who represented a district of 120,000 voters, they were not allowed to speak. Sergeant at arms being ordered to escort elected officials outside of the chamber, and as soon as a citizen who didn't happen to be, let me make sure I point this out. At no time in North Carolina history has an elected public local official not been allowed to speak at a public hearing at the General Assembly. It had never happened in our entire history. And as soon as someone tries to speak who is not an elected official and she says something that's not in line with the marching orders of Jim Black, she was interrupted and cut off as well. All of this circled around at the direction of Jim Black because the representative who put the bill forward for that public discussion was Representative John Rhodes, who dared to try and expose the corruption of Jim Black. I've got to get a quick response from you, John, listening back to it. It's probably been a while since you've been down that memory lane.
Oh, it has been, but I sure am glad that you played that again for the people, because that is so reflective of what is going on in their state legislature. There's a terrible disconnect as to what the people are calling for and asking for out in the citizenry and what is happening in their state legislature. The state legislature is just not listening to the public, and they are eroding their liberties and their freedoms every day that they're in session.
Major erosion. For example, the majority signed a bill to deal with the Kelo decision and the abuse of eminent domain. You had Democrats and Republicans, because you had 80-some people that were sponsors of the bill, but just because the majority wants it, it doesn't matter. It's like the old Animal House book, all the animals are equal, it's just some are a lot more equal than others. Whatever the leaders want, they have been able to get.
And folks, if you're listening to this, if it's the first time you've heard these sound bites, I can only imagine what you must be thinking or feeling, but I have to warn you, you haven't heard the best of it yet. All right, I have to tell you that. And I know for people that aren't aware of how things have gotten in state government of North Carolina, you hear these things, your gut must be in knots right now. But you have to ride through on this. You've got to allow this awakening to happen. If you don't realize what we're up against as a citizenry and how bad things have gotten in our state government, you need to ride this through and hear it to the finish.
Well, understand that House Bill 1017 was dealing with the ultimate fiefdom in Raleigh, and that is education. And anyone that tries to take away any power or territory or influence from education in Raleigh, they will do everything that they possibly can to protect their fiefdom.
All right, and let's get one phone call in here real quick. And I know we've got some folks that have been on hold for a really long time. And Bill, I appreciate it. Thanks for getting in here.
Good, Matt. Thank you. I guess the only way I can describe it is arrogance, and I unfortunately don't believe that it's going to go away when Jim Black is no longer there unless other fundamental changes are made. There are incremental ways to make changes, and there are sweeping ways to make changes. And my first question is, do either of your guests see the possibility of something as sweeping as a constitutional convention?
All right, I'll give them a chance to answer the question. Did you have a follow-up as well? Did you want to hold through the break?
Yes, I did, yes.
All right, we'll hold you through then, and we'll give Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes an opportunity to answer the question about a possible constitutional convention, and more of your phone calls and some more sound bites as well coming up here on Take a Stand. The Mountains, our guests in the studio here, Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes, and we're glad to have them with us today. Now, their trip to Western North Carolina today is because of an induction into a new citizen organization that has been formed by citizens in North Carolina called the John Rhodes Society of Honest Politicians. They have given the namesake of that organization to one of our guests today, and it's because of the example he set while serving in the General Assembly and being consistent, calling out for exposing the corruption, fixing it legislatively so that more corrupt individuals would have a harder time abusing the trust of the public, and then also finding that even within his own party, some of the hierarchy would chase him out for those very stands. And so the people of North Carolina have decided, a number of people have decided, you know what, those are traits we want in more of our elected officials. And so they have started up the John Rhodes Society of Honest Politicians, and they are having the initial induction into their Hall of Fame, I guess you could call it, tomorrow night at Ferguson Auditorium at AB Tech. The meet and greet will start at 5:30 p.m., and both Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes will be there, both of them being inducted, and our very own Senator R.L. Clark from Western North Carolina being inducted as well. It's free to the public. There's no charge charge to attend, and so we want to encourage folks to get out there and get a chance to meet both of these fine heroes for North Carolina reform. Even if they didn't win the re-election to get back in there, the public recognizes that winning elections and losing is not really where the fight is. It's about staying the course on getting it back in the hands of the people and making sure that self-government lives for a long time in North Carolina. All right, now we have Bill still on the line. Bill, thanks for hanging through here. The question, the thoughts or potential for a constitutional convention in North Carolina, the pros and cons of that.
Well, your bottom line is, since they're not paying any attention to the current Constitution, I don't know that getting a new one would make a whole lot of difference. Really, until if they would follow the current Constitution, you'd be pretty close to where you need to be to start with. But right now, the law doesn't matter in Raleigh. The whole idea that anybody would actually follow the rules is a joke. And the idea that we've had change and it's all getting cleaned up, well, the new rules that have just been put out for the House, remember, the Senate adopted the same old rules opening day, just ran over any discussion. There just wasn't any. But in the House, the new rules basically keep a key feature of the old rules, which is that the Democratic leadership is in charge of everything, office assignments, committee assignments. And what I tell people is visualize a Duke-Carolina game, and Duke's coach gets to pick all the Carolina players that get to go on the court. Not a great game. Better yet, all the sports writers actually are working for Duke, and so if the Carolina players don't fight too hard, they'll give them a good write-up. If they're actually serious, they'll make them look like clowns. Oh, really not a good game. And that's what's going on in Raleigh right now.
All right, and Bill, a follow-up?
Well, I feel that there are 100 counties, and as long as we in North Carolina, I feel like we have 100 states of North Carolina, and that we have no hope for honest government as long as the folks in Raleigh get to vote on everything that impacts our local situation here in the Western Carolina counties or any other county in North Carolina. One thing that I miss a lot, and I've seen it just practically disappear from the voters' ballot, is an occasional opportunity for a statewide referendum on something. There's just nothing to vote for on anymore, whether it's non-binding or not. Can we bring back some referendum?
Well, actually, I'd like to see one or two constitutional amendments. I don't know that we need a whole convention, but I would like to see a possibility of recall so that you don't have to put up with people that go down there and forget who sent them.
Yeah, and also a constitutional Bill of Rights, I think, too, a taxpayer Bill of Rights locked into a constitutional type thing is something I would support also.
That's very important. A taxpayer Bill of Rights for North Carolina is absolutely needed now.
I don't know where you get the energy, but keep fighting the fight.
We thank you. People like you.
Thanks a lot, Bill. Appreciate it. We've been playing some different sound clips through the program today and trying to give some perspectives of how things operate in Raleigh. And the one that we just played in the last segment, for a lot of people who had never heard that before, I can only imagine what they must be feeling right now. To think, am I listening to something from Iran or China or the old Soviet bloc? No, that's right here in North Carolina.
But we had one-party rule in North Carolina that much longer than they had it in the Soviet Union.
Interesting point. But in those sound bites that we played, it's not the end of it. Even though if you're just tuning in, you missed out on it, you can check the podcast later this evening at wwnc.com and listen back to it. But you had a situation where Representative Marvin Lucas, who was a henchman for Jim Black on the marching orders of Jim Black, was shutting down a supposed public hearing, having the sergeant-at-arms escort out Mecklenburg County elected officials, not allowing them to speak, gaveling people down and interrupting them when they didn't say what Jim Black wanted to be heard in the public hearing, all these things going on. And as upsetting as it may have been for people to already hear it, you haven't heard the whole thing yet. It gets worse, but also it's important to note that there were 3 members of the Western delegation that sat there and watched this happen. That's Representative Ray Rapp, Representative Bruce Goforth, and Representative Susan Fisher. Now, Representative Ray Rapp, from what we understood and what I'm remembering, he did get up and leave. And he said on the program after that, when we started playing these sound bites in Western North Carolina, he came on the air and he did criticize the leadership. He did criticize that it was a terrible thing, and that's why he got up and left. He didn't want to be a part of that. And Representative Bruce Goforth and Susan Fisher both came on after we started playing the sound bites as well, and saying that they didn't like it. If they had any opportunity, they would have insisted that things happen differently. But take that or leave it as you want. When it came down to the roll call vote at the end of the day, they all voted in line with the direction of Jim Black.
You see, Matt, that's why I say that this is not necessarily a Republican or Democrat issue. You have sins by omission and sins by commission. And if you sit there and you see something egregious happen to the people of North Carolina and you refuse as an elected representative or senator to stand up and say something about it, you're just as guilty as participating in it as Jim Black.
And there was only one representative who did stand up and speak from the committee to try and address what was going on there, that there was no historical precedent to shut down public hearings or public comment by elected officials from school boards or from county commissions and things, and he was just blown off. And he was gavelled down from the chair as well. But let's play the next clip right here. It's a shorter clip. It's a little bit less than a minute, but this is from the same travesty of a so-called public hearing that took place in Raleigh. Let's play that clip.
If not, the chair will take the discretion to allot the additional time left to...
Mr. Chairman.
I don't know who that
Will the bill sponsor be allowed to speak on the bill?
The bill sponsor has spoken.
Will the bill sponsor be allowed to speak on the bill, Mr. Chairman?
I will not repeat that, sir. We'll move on. The additional allotted time, we will go back and allot 10 additional minutes to the proponents of the bill. Sir, you're not allowed to speak, sir.
Well, you just cycle through it. No one else is standing up. I would like 3 minutes to address
No, sir. The answer is final, no.
The sponsor of the bill that was not being allowed to speak for the bill he wrote was Representative John Rhodes, who's sitting here in the studio with us. You will not be allowed to speak. Stunning. This is North Carolina, folks. This is your state government. We'll be back with more during that short break. It really is stunning. I mean, even though I've heard these sound clips over and over again, I want people to understand this may be one committee meeting. It just happens to be one where we were able to get the audio. This kind of thing goes on all the time in Raleigh. Maybe not to the measure that we saw in that example with a sergeant at arms escorting elected officials out and not allowing people to speak, from a community. But the way that, Representative Rhodes was shut down, being the sponsor of the bill, not even being allowed to speak, those kind of things, if you don't play to the leadership's demands, then that's what happens to you and to your legislation on behalf of your communities. John?
Well, it's just really interesting, too, the media reports after that. They just villainized those citizens and myself back in our local hometown paper for even bridging the gap of wanting to try to change anything for the better in education in our community. And that was just very strange to me. Not any talk really about how egregious it is that our liberties and freedoms were being tread upon in our state legislature, but just how bad it was that they would want to try to change education and break up a huge behemoth school system like Charlotte-Mecklenburg School with 120,000 students.
Well, and this wasn't even a bill it wasn't as if this was a binding bill that was going to change the local situation. This was merely a bill to allow the local people to have a public debate and discussion about it.
That is correct.
But let the public people, you're going to actually let the public participate in their government? I mean, how could you?
Well, you just heard what happened when they tried to participate in a so-called public hearing, which state law says must be held on any of these type bills, and yet the leadership was upset that they were even being forced to have an actual hearing. So instead of having an actual hearing, shut it down.
But the law doesn't apply to them. Haven't you figured that out?
Oh, I have. I figured it out a long time ago.
Share the news.
Well, it didn't only happen in Education Committee, but also on the House floor. I can remember very well a 100th year anniversary for the town of Cornelius, which is located on Lake Norman around Davidson. The bill came up on the House floor, the honoring resolution. Generally, the House reading clerk will read that. The speaker will allow the state representative who has that area in their district to speak on it. The speaker made a very short statement. We will allow the reading clerk to read the resolution in its entirety, but there will be no discussion on this bill. We will have an up or down vote.
And let me give you another example, because it involves Marge Carpenter from up this way. There was a bill involving teachers from all over the state, the portfolio bill, where they were going to decide who could teach based on a notebook and a video. It was an invitation to fraud, and basically it was letting an insider group screen out who could teach, and the teachers were really upset. The first year I tried to run an amendment to get rid of portfolios, Jim Black wouldn't hear it. The second year, Marge Carpenter ran the bill because, well, maybe Jim doesn't like me since I wouldn't vote for him. I knew too much about him before the session started. They went to Marge and they said, look, if you insist on doing this, we'll kill it just like we did with Shubert, but if you won't insist, we'll study it. So she said, okay. She told me, I said, well, nobody talked to me, so I put it in. Black didn't see it coming because they thought they'd taken care of it. Got what I wanted, passed the House, matched language in the Senate. The House and Senate passed identical language, and somebody went into the conference report and put in the language that Jim and the boys wanted that had never passed either house of the legislature, and that had been specifically rejected by the House of Representatives. And if you go back to the calendar for the day we adjourned that year, that's the day I put in a resolution saying, excuse me, y'all completely violated the rules. Mr. Black, tell us what lowlifes did that and fix it. And they just threw us out of town. And you know, the Capitol Press Corps apparently has a literacy problem because they couldn't read the House calendar to report that.
Yeah, and I tell you, there's so many examples over the last few years that we could point to on that. And one of the sound clips that I searched desperately for in my archives and I couldn't find, it was one of my favorites, is where Representative John Rhodes and Representative John Bluss, who's also been on the program with us before, there was a matter before the House, and the Speaker Jim Black was moving forward in it and going for a voice vote and said, any objections? And here's Representative John Rhodes and John Bluss yelling from the floor, objection, and he just kept ignoring them, and he's like, without objection, and you hear the yelling in the background, Mr. Speaker, and objecting, and just without objection, the bill passes. Boom, there goes the gavel. It's an amazing sound clip.
Matt, I know the answer to this question, but citizens have got to be asking, why were those two or three the only ones speaking out on this issue? And it's because there is coercive measures in the House to strip a committee assignment from someone or take a little pork out of their district to keep them from being as effective.
But the bigger coercion is that the press will make you look bad at home. And in defense of the press, I see why they wouldn't report it. It's not news. It happens all the time.
Good comeback. All right, we're going to come back with more with our guests, Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes, with us for about another 20 minutes on the other side, and that's about it. So if you have any questions or comments, we invite you to get in on the other side of this news. We'll be back after Wall Street Journal after the news as well. Stay tuned. Talk of the mountains, and we have enjoyed our guests here with us today, Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes. They are in western North Carolina. I won't say for the whole weekend because I don't know if they're here through Sunday. Yes, you're staying here for the whole weekend in western North Carolina. Hopefully the weather will be as agreeable throughout the weekend as it is for you today. We're glad to have you here. Now, we've been talking about the health of state government in relation to a little disease called citizenry. And we've been offering a little bit of medicine to that. And to assist in that, not only have we been getting perspectives and some different ideas from Senator Shubert and from Representative Rhodes, but also I've been hoping to refresh some people's memories or maybe spark an awakening by playing different sound bites through the program today of what is exactly going on in Raleigh with citizens who dare speak up and the representatives who represent them. And so I think that today's program probably has had one of two effects on people. I'll just take a guess here. Either they feel great validation and encouragement, or they're at the very beginning of a cycle of awakening and their stomach is in knots, they feel sick to their stomach, they're angry, their blood pressure's up, and they don't know what to do next. I'm thinking there's probably not a lot of gray area in between if they've listened to the whole show today.
I would agree, Matt. It's very egregious what's going on in Raleigh and the state legislature and other branches of government as regards to citizens' freedoms and their liberties are concerned. And state government wants to continue to take more and more of their money through higher taxes, and it's unfortunate.
All right, and Senator Shubert, for the 5 o'clock listeners just getting out of work and tuning in, what would you want to give them as a first impression as they get caught in, as they step onto this freight train that's been moving at 80 miles an hour for the last 2 hours?
Jim Black was a little puppy dog, the run of the litter. The big boys they have not come close to yet, and until the press starts going after the rest of the problem, I don't see a solution, but I think with people like you and your listeners, we may be starting to see some changes made.
All right, I had an email come in, and I want to ask you this before we get to the phone lines. But here in western North Carolina, I try to convey the message I get from other parts of the state, or people that are active and email, networks and all this. They'll tell me when I'm in Charlotte or in Raleigh or Greensboro, other parts of the state, they say, wow, those folks out there in the West, they got it going on, and indeed both of you have said a couple of times during breaks today, wow, we don't get this kind of feedback or this kind of response in our home areas. And an email came in asking that, basically, what kind of reaction do you get for your leadership and for the controversial stands for exposing corruption and for the true reform that you both have advocated over the years? What's the response back in your home areas?
Well, I've been very fortunate. I've had grassroots support, possibly because I came up through the school of hard knocks and my opponents told so many lies that as people realized they were lies, I did build up a core of support. And even when I ran for governor against tremendous odds, I could carry my home county because they knew me. John, on the other hand, has really gotten beaten up, largely because I think of the influence of the Charlotte Observer, the effectiveness poll, and basically the coordinated Democratic lie campaign that has falsely portrayed what he's been able to accomplish in Raleigh.
Yeah, and with John, with your situation, I know there was also the guilt of omission from your own party, in the hierarchies of your own party, where for someone who on the verge of validation for things you had pushed for, legislative reforms and exposing the corruption for so long, a lot of people out there might say, okay, well, this guy was a Republican, he was talking about this for years. I've heard him on Matt's show for a long time now, for 2 or 3 years, talking about these kind of things, and now it's all being validated. Every newspaper, every news outlet in the state is talking about what you were talking about for years, and yet the Republican Party, the hierarchy, primaried you out in your district. And that was such a shocker for a lot of people around the state who follow the reform movement. And so, I understand what Senator Shubert is saying, but also there's that element too, where I know for myself sometimes I get myself in trouble with some Republicans saying, well, you're on a conservative talk radio station. What are you doing, or tagging Republicans or anything? I'm not looking at corruption through a blinder of a D or an R, and so for me it's not that puzzling that you get primaried out because you're wanting to shake up the system that people, whether they have a D or an R, want to take advantage of.
Well, Matt, we've got to get away from these labels of R or D. Right now, North Carolina, unfortunately, does not have a conservative choice, to be honest. And if you look at some historical data, you can see that. But basically, the folks in my district, if they would have just had the right information, I think that they would have probably put me back in there. But I was pretty vilified in my community back home for trying to expose this corruption, trying to make it better. We did the best we could in some very difficult circumstances to serve the citizens and the constituents of our community.
And now some people around the state who are mindful of the reform movement, and I will call it that. There's a grassroots movement here. Never mind, when I say Democrat, Republican, we're talking hierarchies. We're talking the people who are sitting at the fancy restaurants in Raleigh coordinating strategies of how to maintain power under their own influence. And the grassroots, there is a grassroots awakening that we're in the midst of and at the starting points of in North Carolina. And some of those folks have decided to honor you with John Rhodes Day coming up later this month, and so now you're here in Western North Carolina as part of an event with this, and we've been talking through this program today, and people have been giving both of you the feedback and the appreciation for the leadership you've shown. And I'm a man of faith, and I believe things happen for a reason, and being freed up from just spending your time in one district in Mecklenburg County, maybe that's what was supposed to happen. You're freed up now to go around the state and talk to folks and encourage them and share your experiences to motivate them to take a stand.
Well, hopefully every time a door is closed, possibly a window is open, Matt, and wherever that leads, either myself or Senator Shubert, in public service, I believe that we both love our state, we love our communities, and we love freedom. And we want to fight for the citizens' freedoms and liberties as much as we possibly can.
All right, and we're going to play one more soundbite in the next segment of the program, but right now let's go to the phone lines. Steve, welcome to Take a Stand.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my call. And I just want to ask your guests a question. Obviously, with anyone who understands or is perceiving what's going on in government at any level, really, will be angry. But when someone asks the inevitable question, what can I do about it? And if they believe that maybe one option that they have or would like to pursue is to get involved in the process by running political office, I was wondering what advice the two of you might give to someone who doesn't have any experience as an office holder, public office holder, but is thinking about doing that. And I'll just hang up and listen to your answers. Thanks very much.
Great question. Thanks. Appreciate it, Steve.
Well, it depends to a degree on what sort of office you're thinking about, but for starters, there's a convention coming up for the Republican Party. If you're a Republican, I don't know what the Democrats are doing, but become involved in that way. Become involved at the local level. The big thing right now is there are a lot of people that want to run for office, but there are not a lot of people that want to help folks run for office. It's amazing how complicated life has become politically with all the new rules that people have put in. Everybody's looking for a treasurer because you can't find one. I wish I could give you an easy way to start, but there just isn't one. It takes a lot of time and effort.
Well, I could say you could get involved with your local party. You have to, I think, come to an understanding of who you are as an individual, what is important to you, and I can share with you, if you are interested in running for elected office, we do not need rocket scientists down in Raleigh or in local elected offices, and we do not need people with huge business acumens. We need individual, everyday citizens who know the difference between right and wrong and who love liberty and freedom and want to fight for it, and that is the most important thing. Is being true to your oath of office, fighting for liberty and freedom of citizens. Forget the pork. It's like drugs. Just say no. Just say no to pork. Say no to the perks.
And people wonder why you're being honored. All right, let's go to the phone lines again. Joe, welcome.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
I'm going to say I really have enjoyed this program, and I was having a good day till I started hearing some of those tapes that you were playing. But I want to tell both your guests that I know what it's like to put yourself out there in the public arena. I was on city council for 4 years in Asheville and ran for mayor and was vilified. I was called the political villain of the year in 2002, and I am a conservative. But your last caller, I would just say go do it, and things will happen. Just go stand up for yourself. Could I just make a couple of statements and ask your guests a question real quickly?
Absolutely. I recognize your voice, and this is former City Councilman Joe Dunn.
That's right. Listen, I want to ask you, I want to change this topic just a tad. I do believe that North Carolina laws are stacked against our citizens, and one of the other issues I think is big in North Carolina is annexation. And I know that you're going to hear the bureaucrats in Raleigh tell you that to keep our cities vibrant, we've got to have annexation and that kind of thing. And I know there's a bill down there to try to stop it, and I'm not for annexation. I have a problem with a lot of it. But let me ask you a question. The cities in North Carolina can take 7 criteria and use any one of those 7 to annex a parcel of land or a community. What would be wrong with a bill to maybe make a city do 4 of the 7 or do a little bit more for their citizens than just cherry-picking one of the 7 criteria? Just curious if that has ever been discussed in Raleigh. Annexation is such an unconstitutional thing in a lot of ways, in my opinion.
Caller, I would say if it's going to put more power in the citizens' hands, absolutely not. They wouldn't consider it in Raleigh. But I want to share with you about, being vilified in office. A lot of times the local media and others will call us naysayers, will call us critics, will call us troublemakers, will call us nutcases. But you know what? Those are just words. Those are just names. We are fighting for something that is more important than our own egos. We are fighting for something that is more important in this community. And understand we do have men and women fighting across the ocean who are having more than names hurled at them. They're having lead bullets and hurled at them, and they are falling and they are dying, and that's why we fight and we persevere back here and we withstand the name calling, the abuse, laughing at on the House floor, because they're giving their life for it overseas so that we can have the freedom to do so here. But in regards to running for office, we just need people that know the difference between right and wrong and who will do it and who are tough enough to stand it out and not worry about the name calling.
Well, it's not
Shubert.
rocket science. It is, like you say, the difference in right and wrong, and you can tell that. You can almost smell it when these city officials, and in your case, the state bureaucrats down there probably try to throw these things down, throw them down your throat. It just takes some common sense. But I'll get off. I don't want to take. I had some other things to ask you, but I'll get off and let someone else talk to you. But
I think
the fight up. And
hold on a second here. I think if I chased you off and didn't let you get another question or two in there, I think the listeners would be lynching me. I know that any time that we've had you on the program, former Councilman Dunn, people have really enjoyed your perspectives. So please do pass along another question here. We'll have them answered on the other side. Is that fair enough?
Okay. You want me to just do it now? Or?
Yeah, just give us another question.
Real quickly, I went to a court session 2 days ago where the city of Asheville was fighting the citizens of Asheville. The citizens of Asheville had started a lawsuit saying, we don't want you to annex us because, number one, you don't have enough police officers on the street. And in North Carolina, I found out yesterday, or day before yesterday, in court, and in North Carolina, when a city annexes any part of any area, they use officers that are in their academies as part of their uniformed police force. Now, my point is this: if you have 300 officers and you have 100 in the academy, they add 400 when they do their annexation policy. Say we have 400 officers on our staff. Well, they don't. They have 300 on the streets protecting our citizens and 100 that are being trained. That's my example. There needs to be something in these annexation laws that allow for a city to tell the truth to their citizens about how many officers are there to protect them and not play games with the numbers being trained in Charlotte. My son's a police officer in Charlotte. They train 120 a year. I don't know what the Charlotte police force is, but if you add 120 to whatever they have, it can make it look real good to those citizens who are expecting that city to protect them when, in fact, they don't have enough officers to begin with. That's another issue I have. Those two, I wish someone would do something about.
All right, thank you. Former Asheville City Councilman Joe Dunn, always good to hear from him. We'll give you both a chance to respond to that on the other side of this break. Also, we've got more of your phone calls, and I'm going to play one more sound clip to help give a perspective of what happens in Raleigh when the citizens dare assert themselves and ask for power to be given to the hands of the people of North Carolina. Thank you, sir. And I'll tell you what, if you want an opportunity to meet the parents of the reform movement here in North Carolina, Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes, not trying to suggest anything about their relationship with that comment, by the way. We want to just...
It's on the way here.
And your entourage just fell out of their chairs here in the Batcave HD. But if you want an opportunity to meet these fine folks, you will get the chance to do so tomorrow night at Ferguson Auditorium at AB Tech here in Asheville. The meet and greet starts at 5:30, and there will be a program at 6 p.m. Both Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes will both be in attendance. It's free of charge. There's no admission cost for the public, and here's an opportunity to meet two of the folks who really were at the tip of the sword for exposing corruption and the reform movement that the grassroots is calling for. I'm not talking about the reform movement that Raleigh politicians are trying to sell to you right now. That's just placating to try and get you to think they're doing something. No, these folks that we have in the studio with us today, they can talk to you about the real deal of what's going on. They know from the front lines. They've seen it with their own eyes, and they know the solutions to it legislatively, and they're here in Asheville from other parts of the state to talk to Western Carolinians this weekend.
And before I say anything about annexation, ask Joe please to come tomorrow night. He probably deserves a special invite to be there if he possibly can. The comments on annexation, why doesn't Raleigh do something? Why aren't they talking about it? Once again, people down there are talking about it, but if the press does not report what's said, it didn't happen. And so by keeping us divided, they keep the status quo in place. There are groups all over the state saying that involuntary annexation is wrong. If you're offering us such a good deal, why do you have to come at the point of a gun and give it to us?
Well, and right now in Buncombe County, two of our legislators, Bruce Goforth and Charles Thomas, have both introduced legislation to stop involuntary annexation in North Carolina, and even the Western delegation is not unifying with them on this. And when people say, "Oh, well, why aren't any legislators jumping on board with it?" Well, there were a couple of legislators from the Fayetteville area last year that had almost the same exact bills put forward, and I'm sorry, but some of the same legislators that are supporting it now here did not support the effort last time around when it was Fayetteville. So it's kind of, well, not in my backyard kind of thing. And it's going to take we, the citizens, getting better at communicating with each other around the state, so that we can compare notes and we know what's happening in one person's backyard, whether it's in Wilmington or if it's in Asheville or if it's in Charlotte or if it's in Greensboro. We as a citizenry need to do a better job of not allowing regionalism to keep us from comparing notes. Because when we start communicating, that's when we can start exercising self-government a lot more effectively. We want to play one more sound bite here, and then we'll get to some more phone calls. I know our time is running out with our guests here in the studio today. So we're going to play one more sound clip here, and it's a continuation of the series that we have started in the first 2 hours of the program. Here you're going to hear what happens when the author of a bill that is being shut down by Jim Black and his henchmen. You're going to hear what happens when the sponsor of the very bill is pointing out that members of a committee that are about to vote on a bill haven't even read the legislation. How dare that sponsor try to point that out? Well, that sponsor's not allowed to speak because that sponsor was Representative John Rhodes, who dared to point out the corruption and call for legislative reforms of the very people who were guiding this so-called public hearing. Here is our final sound clip for today. Listen.
So this time we're going to call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, bill sponsor, Representative Rhodes.
You're out of order, sir.
Mr. Chairman, some of these members haven't even heard this bill. They have been absent. They haven't even heard this bill. They won't know what they're voting on.
Mr. Rhodes,
Chairman, can you please
Representative Rhodes, you're out of order. You spoke last week.
Let the citizens of Mecklenburg County have a voice.
I shall not ask you again, sir. Let's have decorum. The clerk call the roll.
Representative Adams.
No.
Allen.
So there is the conclusion for you. Without even reading the legislation, the orders of Jim Black were followed by the lapdogs on that committee who went about you heard the enthusiasm. No! You heard it go, and it went right down the line, and the bill was shut down without any opportunity for the people of Mecklenburg County to have an opportunity at a public discussion about deconsolidation issues. Why? Because their representative dared to actually point out the corruption in Raleigh, and that was the reason for the shutdown there. John, perspective, listening back to a trip down memory lane there.
Oh, well, that was interesting to hear that back, and it makes me very sad that things like that are going on in our legislature, but it makes me very happy that some of the greater offenders are probably going to prison. But, the thing is understanding that how all of North Carolinians are affected in the state budget. Many times you didn't even have a chance to read the budget. They would put it out on the table. They would take an up or down vote on it 5 minutes after it's put on your desk. We're talking about a $18 billion spending plan, 300-page document, 55-page supplement, and many of the members hadn't even read it.
5 minutes to read it.
And it's not just that they didn't like John because he had integrity and they knew what they were doing. If there is an issue they don't want debated, they will do whatever it takes. John, not only was it John, but John was on an issue they didn't like what he wanted to do. And it doesn't matter what the public wants. It doesn't matter what the majority of the legislature wants.
So true.
Yeah.
But the problem is the majority of the legislature is afraid of the power, whether it's the power of the press or the power of the speaker or the president pro tem. And it just, until they're more afraid of the people back home than the people in Raleigh, they're not going to be able to represent the people at home very effectively.
Well said. Let's go to the phone lines again. Gail, welcome to Take a Stand.
Good afternoon to you and your guests. I don't have a question, but I would like to make a couple of comments. First of all, after hearing what I've heard, all I can say is, are we beyond being ashamed and embarrassed? I mean, this is absolutely awful to think that this is going on in our state government. And while I've been waiting, you have discussed this a little bit, but I appreciate the fact, listening to your guests, that they have the opinion that wrongdoing needs to be dealt with, whether there's an R or a D after the individual's name, and I really appreciate that. At the national level, I noticed the Democrats ran opposing the Republicans because of their lapse in morality while they were in leadership, but if you look back over history, they didn't do very much to discipline their own when they were caught in wrongdoing. And so I appreciate the fact we ought to clean up the wrong no matter who the person is, and so I appreciate hearing that from you. I think that the name of the game is not to win, but it's to win ethically and with integrity, and then to behave that way when they get elected. And I think we as citizens are at fault. Now, maybe a grassroots effort is getting started. I hope, indeed, Matt, you're right there. But I think citizens have the responsibility. They need to wake up. They need to care. They need to be informed, and they need to stand up with some backbone when they hear about this wrongdoing going on. And I think instead of candidates having to spend so much money running for office, we have a responsibility as citizens to learn a little bit about the candidates on our own, to find a candidate that we can respect and stand behind, and then get out there and do it. And when they are maligned and falsely accused and wrong things said about them, we ought to pick up the telephone, or we ought to write the letter to the editor or write the guest commentary and do something to stand behind the people who deserve to be supported. But this blindly voting for your party, no matter what, I think has got to end. And I just say hats off to the two of you. I'm sorry I can't be there tomorrow, but I appreciate you, and may your tribe increase. Thanks so much.
And thanks so much, caller. I will share this. We've got to get away from those party labels because, I fight against the increased spending and tax increases, and it's very depleting for me to stand across and say that we need to not raise taxes, increase spending, and have the Democrat majority leader say, well, Representative Rhodes, half your caucus voted for the tax increase and increased spending plan the Republicans did last session. Why would you be opposed to it? You really don't have any more ammunition when those types of things happen. So it's conservatism that is important that wins the day.
Well, I like that caller. One thing, it goes back to an informed public. That really is the clue. You've got all these people saying we need campaign finance reform to limit the amount of money, and the papers that are leading the charge are the papers that will get more power if you do it. Right now, every time they've reformed campaign finance, the crooks have done even better because the honest people played by the rules. So it really comes down to an informed public. That is the start. It's your government, or as Franklin said, you've got a republic if you can keep it.
Right. All right, let's go to the phone lines again. Zora, thanks for holding. You're on Take a Stand.
Hi, Matt.
Hello.
First, I want to tell you we have a mutual friend. I'm a good friend of Gene Harris down in Stone Mountain.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm a longtime Republican here in Buncombe County, and I've just been I'm a general contractor, and I don't usually have time to listen to you, but I've enjoyed today so much, and I want to commend Representative John Rhodes and the senator for their courage. If they would have allowed the General Assembly to work properly, all of this wrongdoing would have come to the surface sooner, and so much time would not have been lost. And, of course, it's ended up that Black has had to surrender. And it's just a shame that a person like that would be leading the state. And I thought it was such a shame that Republicans were cooperating with him. Now, I've been a Republican since Eisenhower. My first vote was for him. So I have a lot of experience here. The other thing I wanted to commend the lady just before me about, this is the people. This year I've been thinking so much about the people, and everything that is going on in our state and our nation is our responsibility. And we must do more as citizens to bring these problems to the surface. I know it's hard because, you don't always have a mode of communication, but it's important that the people realize their responsibility in this. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was this is typical of the Democrat Party in Raleigh being in power for so long. When Holzhauser was elected, they had been in power for 100 years, and that gives a lot of time for these power structures to be built up. That's just really bad. We do need the competition between the two parties, but we can't always depend on the Republicans either, because about 10 years ago, when Bob Long and his group were getting so powerful and just taking over the party here in Buncombe County, like they have recently, and making their deals with the Democrats, and you give me one person elected, and we'll shoot 1,000 votes over to your two Democrats. See, these deals have been going on here, and every once in a while I just get all I can take of it. And 10 years ago, I ran for chairman of the Buncombe County Republican Party, and I thought it was going to go real smooth. I didn't realize that people felt power was so important. And so Bill Fishman came up, and he decided to run against me. And the reason he gave me was that we do not want a chairman of the Buncombe County Republican Party that is pro-life.
I appreciate the personal perspectives there. We're way late on a news break. Let's hit this break real quick. We'll get one more phone call. Eric's been holding for a while. We'll get his call, and we'll get a chance for final comments from our guests here in the studio, Senator Fern Shubert and also Representative John Rhodes, right here on Take a Stand after this. On Talk of the Mountains, we have been very honored to have Senator Fern Shubert and Representative John Rhodes take the entire afternoon to be with us here today, and the listeners of Take a Stand all across western North Carolina. And also, I've got to say, too, I've got to believe for our listeners in the upstate of South Carolina or eastern Tennessee, I hope this has been a motivating day for you as well. Some people say, oh, I'm so outraged, look how bad things are. No, the fact that you know all the bad things going on is an improvement. It's an empowerment of the change that is occurring in our state. Let's take one more phone call here, and that is Eric. Thanks for holding on, Eric.
Hey, Matt. Hey, John and Fern.
Hey there.
Hey, Eric.
I have a comment and a question. My comment, though, first deals with annexation. It seems also that the League of Municipalities it's one of the most powerful lobbying groups down there, and until we can get somebody that will stand up to the money people, men of integrity or congresspersons of integrity to stand up to these people, we're not going to change the annexation laws either. And then I have a question. With the new speaker, because Jim Black has had to resign, we have a new speaker. But I don't really foresee a lot of things changing, in my opinion, because, when all of the bills that were filed, if they wanted to get rid of them, if they wanted to make a statement, they would send those bills to the Rules Committee. And who was the chairman of the Rules Committee back then?
That was Representative Culpepper.
Well, and Joe Hackney, right?
Hackney was on a Judiciary Committee. I think what you're getting at, though, caller, is nothing's going to change. The window dressing has been dressed up just a little bit. One of the things that we have got to do before it will change any at all, and that is diminish the concentration of power in one or two and divide that power amongst 120 members of the House and do the same over in the Senate.
Right, and we're quickly running out of time here, and Senator Shubert, I wanted to give you an opportunity. The folks all across western North Carolina listening right now, and beyond, indeed beyond western North Carolina, what do you want to leave them with this evening?
I was in the House, I was in the Senate, I ran for governor. You've started cleaning up where you had the least problems. There's a lot more to do. And come out and honor John tomorrow, because he deserves the recognition. He has fought a good fight, and he is a champion, and you really have a lot more champions than you know. There are a lot more people on our side than you can imagine. That's why they don't want to let you know.
And an interesting thing is how many times, either with editorial boards or with talk radio shows or anything else, have these kind of 2.5-hour, 3-hour discussions gone on like this across the state of North Carolina? Not a whole lot. Representative John Rhodes, you're going to be honored tomorrow night. People are going to get a chance to meet you at Ferguson Auditorium at AB Tech and Senator Shubert as well. Tomorrow night, AB Tech, Ferguson Auditorium. Meet and greet starts at 5:30. A program will begin at 6. No charge to the public. But for folks that can't make it out there tomorrow night, what message do you want to leave them with all across western North Carolina this evening?
Well, they can always go to the website at www.johnrhodesday.com, but I will share, we are in the darkness right now, but the morning is coming, folks. The morning is coming. I believe that there is a reform fire that is spreading across the state. I believe it is starting in western North Carolina. Have hope for the future, and let's take our state back.
All right. Thank you very much, both of you, and thank you for taking so much time to be with us this afternoon. We appreciate it.